Richard Drax.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I refer members to the Register of Members' Interests? It's always a pleasure to follow the honourable member's contribution. I don't agree with it always, but it's always a pleasure to listen to it anyway. While my friend, the Treasury Chief Secretary, is in his position, may I say, and I've already shouted at him quietly in the corridor, that we are very disappointed at Dorset Council that levelling up does not apply to us. With some of the deepest pockets of deprivation and poverty in my constituency of South Dorset, we put a huge amount of effort, and I must praise all those who took part, including the business community, in putting this application to the government. Regrettably, because we went to a unitary status, we went from Category 1 to Category 3, which was blatantly unfair. And so I appeal to the government, don't forget us in South Dorset. We're getting a little tired of being forgotten, Madam Deputy Speaker. On to the budget. I just want to talk a little bit about our philosophy, if I may, conservative philosophy. We've had a few days now to digest the Chancellor's enthusiastic delivery last Wednesday. First, let me acknowledge that we have been living through unprecedented times, and the financial pressures on the government have been extraordinary, and particularly now, post-pandemic, when all the chickens are coming home to roost. I applaud the Chancellor's deft handling through 3 controversial lockdowns, although I'm afraid I didn't agree with them. There's no doubt the furlough scheme saved countless jobs and is now enabling the economy to bounce back impressively, and a lot in the budget I welcome and will help my constituents, not least the funding for skills, which I absolutely endorse, the taper relief to universal credit, which will help a lot of my constituents as well, and of course the help for businesses with the business rates, although as many members have said, we long for the business rates to be reviewed completely. However, alarm bells for me are ringing. And as a Conservative, looking at a further £150 billion spending spree caused an intake of breath, I have to say. With the UK's total debt now over £2 trillion and taxes at their highest for 70 years, I wonder how long before the country's credit card finally expires. The majority of the budget, the customary groan from the opposite benches, of course I expect that because they just spend money like water. The majority of the budget was contrary to our philosophy of less state, lower taxes and a free market economy. It was more big state and government knows best how to spend individuals' money. It does not. Our job is a simple one, to create an environment where business can thrive, allowing the entrepreneurs and innovators in the UK to do what they do best, while attracting the best from around the world to invest here, which, post-EU, we are now in a position to do, Madam Deputy Speaker. To this end, the final few sentences in the Chancellor's 70-minute budget speech, which ran counter to the first 67 minutes, gave me hope. We left the EU for many reasons, but one of the most significant was to enable us to govern ourselves and make our own laws. The vision during those torrid pre-Brexit years was of a low-tax, Singapore-style country, producing and innovating our way to a new and prosperous future. I believed that then, and I believe it now. But this won't be achieved, Madam Deputy Speaker, if we continue to favour big state spending, thereby establishing an irreversible trend that can only continue to rise. Is this something that we on this side of the House are prepared to countenance? What we need, and I would say urgently, is a vision, a narrative, a plan, and the political courage to promote and see it through. But this will be unsellable and unworkable unless radical reform accompanies it. Take the NHS, for example, and don't get me wrong, I have absolute respect, admiration for the doctors and nurses who work on the front line, and they have done a fantastic job through the pandemic. But some commentator recently noted that the NHS was an organisation with a country attached. It's predicted that day-to-day government spending on this behemoth could rise to a staggering 44%. This is an altar that the country can simply not afford to worship any longer. Does any other country have a system like ours? It doesn't. And I do wonder why. And while monies are short, why are we not looking at reversing our priorities? When you consider the private sector accounts for 85% of the workforce, why do we continue to pour good money after bad into the public sector without reform? We need a public sector, of course, and it makes a valuable contribution. But it's paid for by the hard work of taxpayers, which the other side simply doesn't understand, who are expected to dig ever deeper into their pockets for inefficiencies in so many areas. And this under a Conservative government with an 80-seat majority. Some years ago, we called for a bonfire of the Quangos. You may recall those days, Madam Deputy Speaker. Depressingly, I read recently that they've only increased in size and influence, the latter totally unaccountable. All departments have done is to delegate their responsibilities to those who all too often are pursuing a very different agenda. Do you wonder that planning, the countryside, the environment, energy, health, to name but a few, are marred in red tape, extra cost, and all too often controversy? And while we throw billions of pounds into a broken system that's too strong, but it needs reform, we cut defence spending. An irresponsible and incomprehensible act. What on earth are we doing? This, after our armed forces so magnificently came to the rescue of the government and did such a great job during the pandemic. And let's not forget, they were not paid some £70 or whatever a truck driver is going to get now. They lived on their salaries. What they get is armed as soldiers, and the government got a fantastic service on the sheep. Let me conclude. Our first priority is the defence of our island, which we ignore at peril. The country sits at a crossroads. Double jabbed and better protected against COVID, we must never, ever, ever lock the country down again. The consequences, financially, physically and emotionally, will be catastrophic. We must learn to live with this disease as we do with any other. So can I urge the government to forget every other plan, B, C, D and E, except the most important one, which is a return to normality. Burdened by high tax and threatened with the spectres of inflation and rising interest rates and a consequent cost of living crisis, there can be no other option. We are Conservatives, and this worrying lead to a big state must end, as the opposition will always, always outspend us. So if we don't get a grip on all this, as Baroness Thatcher once famously said, we will shortly run out of other people's money.
Neera Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. On Wednesday,